Hello everyone, my name is James, and I'm here today to talk to you about Nuclei and the power of creating your own custom templates for it. For those of you that don't know me, I am a member of a cybersecurity team where I do everything from incident response to SIM management and working with the SOC on creating new rules and alerts. I am a huge fan of automation and scripting wherever possible, partially because I'm lazy, but also partly because it makes everything more efficient and it makes your life easier. So, who doesn't like that? I rely on Python for a lot of my automation and my scripting. However, Python is definitely not the best at doing everything. It's kind of like duct tape, where you can use it, it can do pretty much whatever you want it to do, but it definitely won't be the best option. So that's why instead of trying to create my own custom scanner or fingerprint engine or something like that, I rely on tools that are already out there. And what's great about Nuclei and the way that it uses templates is that you can tailor it to be whatever you want it to be or whatever you need it to be. Uh, it's also great to have all the out of the box templates that it comes with, or the community templates. So there's a lot you can accomplish with that in terms of both checking for misconfigurations and vulnerabilities, as well as just identifying assets. And while some of the vulnerabilities or the CVEs that it checks for, uh, while they might still be valid bugs, you'll probably find that if you're getting them on a public program, you're probably going to get duped. Uh, the downside of them being, these out of the box templates that are open to the community is that everybody else has them and everyone else is running Nuclei against every single public bug bounty program that's out there. So where I've had better luck is instead making my own custom templates, whether it's looking for bugs or if it's just looking to identify assets. Um, Basically, I think to myself is when I'm doing a repetitive process, can this be automated? And specifically, can it be turned into a Nuclei template? And if you have multiple things you want to check, you can take multiple templates and turn them into a workflow. So I'm going to cover all of that today, but let's dive right into it. The kind of things that I like to check for, or that you should be trying to check for with the template, is basically you want to be looking for matching things out of the response from a specific endpoint. By default, a lot of times you'll just hit the root page of a web server. But if you have a specific bug, you'll see this with CVEs or exploits. It'll be calling a specific endpoint that's hard coded. You can also do fuzzing with a nuclei template where you can put in a variable and pass through a bunch of a whole word list to it. But we can get into that later as well. So for starters, I figured a good example would be showing you one of the out-of-the-box templates that comes with nuclei, and then how you can expand that to capture some more bugs. So I'm going to look today at the basic cores misconfiguration that is under the vulnerability generic one. So breaking down just the simple formatting, this is pretty much a standard YAML file. It makes a lot of sense once you get used to it, but if you're not familiar with YAML or other coding languages that look similar to it, it might not make sense to you. So the top part is just the ID, or the name of the template essentially. And then here's all info that you can, pretty much all this is optional. So this is what will show up when you are actually scanning for it. Put your name, the severity here. This is the same severity that'll pop up when you actually run it. So you can set this to be critical, high, medium, or low. And then also when you're running a large amount of templates, you can filter down by severity. Additionally, you can have specific tags. This one's tagged as cores, and this also helps with filtering as well. So usually I'll try to set both of these, so then that way, if I'm trying to add my template into other workflows, then I know I can filter down the same way that I would filter the out-of-the-box templates. So getting down into the requests portion of this template, the real meat and potatoes here. Uh, this is where you define the actual requests and then what you're looking for in the response. So this part's pretty much self-explanatory. Make a GET request, and then the path, or where we're requesting it from, is just the base URL. So if we're going to pass in this case, google.com, it doesn't matter if we pass it this whole long string, this whole long URL here, which includes the files and the links here. Nuclei can only go to the base URL or whatever you have hard coded in here. So that is one little bit of a drawback, but I think that it's I wouldn't say it's intended, or maybe it is, who knows. But it's forcing you to check for specific things, and not just to be spraying all over the place, I guess you could say. So And what's happening in this template here is that we are checking for the origin to be arbitrary. So not unless you happen to be testing evil.com, this is an arbitrary origin that's hard coded in here. So under a request, you can define basically any part of the request as well. So you have headers in here. You can put in, here you have origin. You can also define everything from user agent. You can get pretty granular here. And then underneath your request part, you have what you do with the response. In this case, it's called a matcher. There's a couple different types. I'll touch on more of those later. This one's pretty straightforward though. It's matching on a word. So basically, this is the same thing as if you were looking at the output in burp and doing control F and looking for access control allow origin evil.com, and then additionally access control allow credentials true. So you can have multiple matchers under here, and then there's what's called the condition, which is under the matcher, and you can have and or. So if we had, say, a couple different outputs that would indicate a valid response for this template, we could list them all under the same words matcher, and then set this condition to be or, and that would work that way as well. And then you can also define the part. If for some reason you don't need this part here, but for some reason you would expect access control allow origin credentials to show up in the body when it wasn't actually in the header, then you want to define the actual part that it's in. So let's get into an example where we can build one of these from scratch and it'll probably make a little more sense. The extension that we're going to work on here is that the the root element or the root page of a web server might not always be vulnerable to this arbitrary origin. There's a lot of different course misconfigurations that are out there. So we're going to look at one where it's an arbitrary subdomain of evil.com and make a template for that, and then we can check it against the live target as well to see if it works. Okay, so let's get into creating our first template here. So we'll just call this course arbitrary. There we go. Arbitrary subdomain. We'll do access control allow credentials because that's the key. .yaml. Okay, so since I'm lazy, I copied and pasted the first part of this file to make this a little quicker. So here we have the name of our template, or the ID, I should say, what it's named. You can also add in, we'll put in a description in here. We'll say checks for arbitrary subdomain accessible with course. Okay, so the key with YAML files is the spacing for the spacing and the dashes, which defines the different sections of this. So it's very similar to Python if you've coded in this before. So you just have to make sure that when you're creating different sections, you want to keep the spacing the same. Otherwise, it'll complain. But fortunately, there's tools out there where you can actually verify your YAML files, so that way you can, before you try running it, it can help you fix some of the errors. Also, Nuclei has the verbose option when you run it, which will help give you some debug messages in case you're having problems. So we're going to go down and define the request section, and the spacing is probably going to be all messed up. So you can do normal requests or you can do raw requests. So we're going to start with a normal request. I'll go over to the templating guide, which this guide gives you a lot of great detail about some of the nitty gritty, but then they also have some basic templates in here, the template examples, which will help you understand it as well. So this is what I guess we can show I believe they have, yeah, a raw HTTP request. So the way I think of the difference between get and raw, or I guess it's base, I should say. Base, you don't have to define, all the details here. It'll get filled in automatically, but you have the option of adding in all of these values. But raw is basically if you were to copy and paste the request from burp, you could put it directly into a raw request and roll with it that way. This is really good for checking for some very specific vulnerabilities or if you need to have special formatting. But it's a lot easier if I'm just looking to request the main page of a website. I don't need to get into the details about user agent or stuff like that necessarily. There's no special headers. So in this case, we'll probably just stick to a base template, but it has the same. So instead of, so you have the raw section defined here, whereas up here you just go directly into the method section. But then after you are done with defining, the method and these options here, the matcher section works exactly the same way. And you can see here it's the same spacing out as in this case it's raw. For up here, it's the same spacing as method. So in reality, actually, we can probably copy this directly from here as well, because we're just looking to get the base page or the home page of the web server. So let me get let's get the spacing right. So there's two main variables that you can use with Nuclei that are defined by default. You have the base URL, which is this is the whatever the URL that is passed into Nuclei up front. That'll get dumped straight in here. And there's also the what you can you know this is a variable because it has the squiggly brackets. You can also define your own variables if you want to pass in a list or something like that. But this is the base URL and host name are the only ones that are provided by default. So base URL has the protocol and the port as well, whereas I think actually it shows it in the raw template here. Whereas this is the other one, host name. So this would just be, in this case, it would just say nuclei.projectdiscovery.io, whereas base URL includes HTTPS and then a port if that was there as well. So I guess we'll go back to our template here. So we just want to request the base URL, and for cores, what you're really looking for is at the response headers to see if it does actually include access control allow origin and access control allow credentials. So since we want both of those, we're going to want to define we could either define two matchers and have a condition of and, or we could define a single one and just have both of them under there. So we're going to want to there's a couple different types of matchers. I guess we can go into that here really quickly as well. So if we go to the HTTP and then, why am I blanking here? Base request, there we go. So we have headers, request condition. Let's be faster. I must not be on the right page. Oh well. Okay, so matchers can be a couple of different things. There's words, there's DSL, and there's also regex. So DSL allows you to do kind of like queries, or you can do substrings, that kind of stuff. DSL basically allows you to do operations on things. I guess is probably the easiest way to say it. You can do operations on the or comparisons on different things. So whereas a word is just like I said before, it's just basically doing like a control F and burp to see if the string is there, and a regex is pretty self-explanatory as well. It just is just a regex. So you can get fairly complex with these. So we're going to start with one that's just you have to define. So for a matcher, you have to define the type. So it's going to be a word. And then you also want to define the words that you're looking for. And then again, since this is we're defining one match here, you want to make sure it stays in line. You only use the tag for to the start of the element. I don't know what the proper YAML term is. So then we want to define a couple different words here. Oh, how foolish of me. I forgot one of the important parts. So because we are testing for cores, we have to make sure the origin header gets added, and we want to have it to be custom. So we want to define the headers section here, and then under headers, you would put your key value pair. So again, I have this copied over here because it'll be easier this way. So in this case, we want the origin to be set to this. So you could also we would do user dash agent, for example, and you could just do, I think the default one is like nuclei or something like that. So you can put whatever headers you want in here and define them in the YAML key value here. And you can see, once again, we're using the host name variable in this case, because if you were to do the base URL, then it would include https : and it would not be a valid origin. So I think we can put this in quotes as well. There we go. Okay, so this is going to add the host name. So if we're going to be passing in, we'll do github.com, then this is going to add the origin of https arbitrary.github.com. to all of our requests. So now that we are adding this to this header to our request, now I want to see if it's going to actually respond with cores and give us the access that we want. And that's where our matchers come in. So we want to be looking for two different things. We first want to be looking for access control allow origin. So we want to be making sure that this exists in the first place. Um, we can also, I guess there's two different ways you can kind of think about this. So we definitely want to check that it is so sometimes what you see is that it's hard coded. Some sites will be hard coded to say, no matter what origin you give it, it's always going to respond with, you know, the main domain or main subdomain's origin. So we don't want to just check to see if it has the keywords of access control allow origin and access control allow credentials. So we could do that in two different ways. So we're going to do, we'll add two different or other ones under here. So we want to set the condition to be and. Um, we could do or if for some reason we wanted to check for a couple different things in here, but not they wouldn't all be accepted. But in this case, we need it to be both allow origin and credentials equal to true. So we'll also add in access control allow credentials, and then we also want this to be true. And then lastly, we could also, so we could get a little bit fancy here and do a string that is like super unlikely to appear in the body. So we could do like, I don't know, JTCSec underscore 12345 6, something like that. Actually, I don't know. I don't think there should be a problem with an underscore, but I'm going to take it out just in case. So we're going to put a very random subdomain, and we can match on that as well. So we'll copy and paste to save some time. There you go. So now it's looking for this to appear in the response body. So we could do that as well. Or sorry, we want to look for this to be in the response header specifically. So we want to define that as the part that we're looking for. And the part can be body, header. I think you can also do cookies. I guess we can check over that as well. I'll just speed this up this time. So yeah, so you have your, I think the parts are defined up here. Yep, you have part header. Um, okay, so definitely could do header and body. Those are the main ones that I use. In this case, we want to do header. So now that we have our condition of and the part is header, that means that all three of these values should be, in order for this template to return as matched, we need to have all three of those values be in the headers. So that is pretty much everything that we want to show. So this should work at this point. So I'm going to run this template, and I'm going to use Barker. If for those of you that aren't familiar with Bug Bounty Hunter, actually I'm wearing the official Bug Bounty Hunter sweatshirt right now. You should check it out. It's pretty cool, and it basically gives you it's a platform for training and learning, and you get this awesome web app called Barker that you get a hack on. There's all sorts of bugs in here. You report them to Zayshano, and lots of fun. But what's nice for this case is that it is vulnerable to cores, or it has a cores misconfiguration, I should say. So I'm going to pull up Burp over here. So this is I just requested the base page here. So we're going to send this to repeater. So if I add origin, we'll just do evil.com. We'll try that. You'll see here that it will return access control allow credentials true, but only for this origin. So evil.com will not show up as um, a misconfiguration. And if you go back to our template that we're looking at first, the out of the box course misconfiguration is only looking at evil.com. So like I said, there's a ton of other course misconfigurations that could be out there besides just evil.com, and that's where you could have some success with having an extension for it. So actually, just for fun, let me take this URL here. So we're going to do echo our URL, pipe it to Nuclei, and then should just be basic cores.yaml. So you can see here that it doesn't match on basic cores because it's not vulnerable to evil.com. But if we turn this into, I guess technically it should be HTTP, but we'll prove it just to be sure. So you can see here that it's still not allowed as an origin, but we can check to see is the subdomain vulnerable. So evil.barker.social.com. You can see here that now evil.barker-social.com is trusted. And since the odds are this subdomain doesn't actually exist for Barker, this means that it's not a whitelist. It's probably trusting any subdomain of barker-social.com, um, which is good for us. As a bug hunter, that gives you a lot of flexibility. So we're going to go back to our template, and actually, for starters, I'll show you how to verify it. So we'll do cat cores. So we're going to take this over. Hopefully, I did it right. So we'll take our text, and we're going to go to YAMLment, which will validate our YAML for us. Hit go, and it's valid YAML. Great. So this is the first thing that I check when I'm creating templates, because actually I'm not like super familiar with the YAML. I just know how to make it work. So I usually will do this right off the bat to make sure that my template's valid. It saves a lot of frustration, we'll say. So we'll go up here to our previous command, and then we're going to run it with our cores, arbitrary subdomain, access control, block credentials 2, and we'll do verbose as well, just in case. So you can see here, I have a debug message that loaded, fantastic, and you can see now that it matched. It shows us that it's trusting the arbitrary subdomain. Fantastic, we got it. You can also see here that we defined it as low. So yeah, congratulations, you just made a working working template. You can kind of take this a step further though, and if we wanted to extract information from the payload, or from the response, I should say, what's handy is if you are looking for, perhaps you're you're trying to find the specific version of something. You're querying a page, you know that the string is there, but instead of having to manually go to this page, you'll see it with some of the out-of-the-box templates. It'll actually extract it and put it in blue next to here. So an extractor works the exact same way as a matcher, and it's just another piece that you define underneath it. So let me make sure we're going to get this right. So you would define an extractor. You want to keep it the same length or width out as everything else under your requests here, and it basically works the exact same way as your matchers. So we're going to define it as so I guess actually what I did previously for this is I defined a regex. You probably don't need to do this. Actually, I think you do. So I defined a regex that would pick up everything after access control allow origin, because we want to make sure that, or I guess in this case we're already making sure with it here, but that's irrelevant. But I guess this gives us a good example of how to do a regex. So we want to do type regex, and then we're going to do part header. So once again, we only want to run the regex against values that are returned in the headers of the response. And then you have to define the actual regex here. And then it works the same way, where you just put the dash to define it. And then I screwed this up. Whoops. Copy and paste failed me. So this is just a regex I previously created. It's just checking for it. So this first part matches on access control allow origin. And then this is just some wildcards here. And then if you're not familiar with regex, these parentheses here is just a capture group, and this is going to match on everything that is not a space that comes after this string essentially here, up until it hits a space again. And if you want to define multiple capture groups, you can actually do an option of group, I think it's called, up here, and you want to do like group. So this is capture group 0, I think. I'm going to mess this up. It's been a while since I did multiple capture groups, but you can define the capture group here as well, which is super, super handy. Especially if you're getting into some very complex regexes. So here we have our extractor defined. We'll save and close this. And I didn't do it right. What am I missing? Oh, duh. I forgot the S. Sorry, extractors. I should have known that from everything else. So it's kind of nice. It won't actually break the whole template. There we go. Okay, so you can see here that I actually don't know why it matched twice. I guess it's probably just the quirk of the way I'm doing it. Um, but it is now pulling out that string that we defined with the matcher. So this makes it quick and easy to see if you're looking for specific results in the response. This will allow you to quickly see what is being determined as vulnerable. So now it might not be super critical for a CORS misconfiguration like this, but it can be handy for other things, especially for version information, that kind of stuff. Yeah, so this is how you would create a specific template looking for one vulnerability, or in this case, a misconfiguration. What you can get really powerful with is that if you've got a whole, so in this case, maybe you've got 10 cores, 10 different cores templates for misconfigurations that you're looking at. And you want to throw that, you've got a list of 100 live web assets. So that means you're going to end up sending 1,000 requests, but maybe only 10 of those hosts actually support cores. So that means you're throwing like math here, like 900 requests at servers that it's never going to be vulnerable because it doesn't support cores. So what you would probably want to do is use a workflow where you can have it match on multiple templates. So you would run a template up front that says, okay, let me know if is this server running cores. If yes, then we want to check all the cores misconfigurations. If it's not running cores, then don't do the other 10 templates, and that way we're not hammering away at these servers, and also it'll speed up your time to finish. So let's get into actually creating a workflow. Okay, so I created a quick template that'll just check to see if the server that we're running the nuclei against is running cores, and we're going to use that as the first step of our workflow. So we'll just run it here. We can see it's just matches on cores initial detect, and we know now that Barker is running cores. So let's look at the examples given by Project Discovery. So this is what a basic workflow looks like. It's very, very similar to a normal template, except you don't have to define things like um, severity. You can give it tag, you can tag it as a workflow if you want. But instead of defining requests, you use a workflows tag here, and then you get into specific templates. So this top one just shows that, as you can see here, it's for Spring Boot. So basically, this first one will probably check to see, this is just a simple detection where it says, okay, is this actually a Spring Boot server? If yes, it's going to check these sub templates here, where it defines a couple of specific CVEs. This is the Jolokia XXE. So this is pretty much very straightforward. I'm sure many of you guys have seen at this point for what you do when you see a Spring Boot server. But we're going to kind of rip off of this for our purposes. So let's create cores-work. Oops, if I spell right, workflow.yaml. Okay. So we'll do id cores-workflow. There we go. Okay. Info and name example cores workflow. Good enough. And we'll give myself some credit, I guess. Okay, so now we're going to get into the actual part of defining a workflow. And really, a workflow is actually honestly easier to create than a template itself. It's just a matter of chaining them together. So we're going to start, I'll show you how to do a basic workflow, and then also how you can factor in some logic to it, so you can get do some pretty cool stuff with it. So we'll start with just workflows. Remember the S this time. So you have to first define the template that you want. So in this case, I can't scroll up. Forget what the name of it is. So we want this to be our initial template. So when you define a template in the workflow at the top, like we're doing here, this is going to be run against everything. So if I input, 100 servers against this template, they're all at least going to hit this template. And that is going to be, we'll paste that here. And this has to be the path to it. So if this was in a different folder, you would just, it could be relative to the folder you're running out of, or relative to where this template is located, or it could be the full path, doesn't really matter. And then you want to define the sub template. So this is what it will step down into if the first template actually matches. And this is where we're going to put our, the template that we created earlier. So if I just do a quick ls here, and I got a bunch of random stuff in here. So this is what we want. Clear. So inside of our sub templates, we're going to define additional templates to be run. So in this case, template, and I just clicked the wrong thing. Paste. We have now put in our second detection here. So basically, we could, like I said before, if we had like 10 cores misconfigurations, we could put them all under here. We would just keep doing. So if we wanted to add in additional ones, we would just do dash template, so on and so forth. We could even do additional subtemplates. So if this was, so first we're checking for cores, and then we're going to check for, I don't know, arbitrary subdomain. Then we want to check for specific subdomains or something like that. If arbitrary was trusted, I don't know. That doesn't really make much sense there. But you would just, it would do the exact same thing. So you just do sub, wow, I'm struggling to type here, sub templates, and then it would work the exact same way that you would define additional templates and so on and so forth. It all is just nested. But we don't need to do additional sub templates here. So we're just going to keep it as this, very pretty straightforward. So hopefully this actually works. We'll do cores dash workflow. Take a second to run. Unless for some reason I did it wrong. Let's do dash v. Okay, I don't understand why it didn't work the first time. Let's try this again. Okay, don't know what's going on the first time, but you can see here that our first template, the initial detect, matched, and then it ran our second template or the sub template against it, and you can see here that it now defined that you have this specific misconfiguration is there. And let's say Barker was also vulnerable to I don't know actually how you define it, but if you do barker-social.com.evil.com, then you could have that as another template you would run, and it would just run through all of them all at once. Um, so I mean that's the nuts and bolts of a template. What you can get into is so if we go back to the examples, we'll bring this back over here, is the multi-conditional workflows, which is pretty cool. So in this case, this is using this Spring Boot workflow here is matching on it's using a tech detect template. So you could also use this for maybe like a WAF detect or something like that. There's a lot of really good ones out of the box. So if we go to templates, and then we want to do technologies, I want to say, and then let's say we're going to do like favicon or something like that. So you can see in here in these out of the box ones, this has a ton of different things in here that it's matching on. And what you could do is that if you use this favicon, I hope I'm saying that right, who knows? If we're using this template as our first template, then what we can do is that since it has these different matchers in here, if it matches on that name, so in this case it's using Lotus Domino. I guess we can go over here to this specific template. That would probably be easier. So if we go to technologies and then Lotus Domino version. Okay, not a good example. Anyways, basically, you can use the matchers from the first template and then go down into your specific subtemplates. Okay, here's a better example. So WordPress. So you could define multiple matchers to this template. So in this case, there's you have just your dash name dash WordPress. So that means that if tech detect detects WordPress, then run these subtemplates. So you can see here, there's a bunch of different out of the box WordPress templates it's checking for. Known vulnerabilities, known CVEs. So you can see here, there's a decent amount here. But if it's not even a WordPress box, you don't want to run these 15 templates against it because you're just wasting time. You're taking up resources on the server. It's just not the best thing to do. So you could have an additional workflow in here where let's say you also have vulnerabilities for other different CMSs out there. Maybe there is you've got templates for like Drupal or something like that. So you would start with if Drupal is detected by this tech detect one, you would add that as another matcher. So you put under here, you do dash name Drupal and sub templates. You have your Drupal templates. So that's where you can get, you can start doing some really cool things where you would just have your one master CMS workflow, and you would throw that at every single host. And maybe at most it's only running one template on a bunch of different ones. And if it can't detect a CMS, then it's going to skip the other 100 templates you have in there. So it can be very, very helpful for having targeted scanning for specific things you're working for, or looking for, I should say. Um, Here's another example of I guess it's a better one, of a multiple matcher one. This is what I was trying to show. I should have just scrolled down. So you have your this one's pulling out a tech detect again. If it is vBulletin, check these exploits. If it is JBoss, check these exploits. So you could do some really cool stuff there. So yeah, that's pretty much it for workflow. I'm not going to go into a matcher workflow, but I mean, here's an example for you if you're interested in that. Um, so I encourage you to give it a try. If you've got an idea of something that you're always manually checking for, then go ahead, try and make your own template. The project discovery documentation is pretty good. This I struggled just reading this guide here, but being able to work off of the examples definitely helped. And the more you write them, the more it becomes a lot easier to just create them on the fly. And then what you can do is that maybe you have your own folder of just your own templates, or you can move your templates into the Nuclei templates folder. So then that way, um, if I've got this sick cores workflow setup, or a CMS workflow setup, I just run that against everything I start with. Any new host I find, run these workflows, and then that way it's already checked for me. Now, a weakness I'll touch on here, specific to cores, is that different endpoints on a site might have different cores restrictions. You'll see this with like APIs sometimes and stuff like that, where hitting the specific user info is only allowed. There's no cores for that, or maybe not no cores. It might be restricted to the specific subdomain, but the rest of the site might have arbitrary subdomains trusted or something like that. So that is one weakness of this specific cores workflow, is that it can't dynamically detect all the different endpoints in the site, or you can't pass it the URLs of all the endpoints in the site, because it only looks at base URL. It doesn't look at the anything after .com. So you could only check the root of the site, but that gives you a really good idea of what the rest of the site is set up like. If it trusts arbitrary domains on the front page, or arbitrary or subdomains, doesn't really matter. Then it's likely that other endpoints, they might have tried to lock down additional endpoints, but they probably didn't lock down everything. So it definitely is helpful. It doesn't fully replace manual testing for some of these things, but it's a great way to get you an idea of where you want to start looking in the first place. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you all found this useful. This is the first time I've ever tried to make anything sort of educational, so please let me know if you like this, or if you have feedback on how I went about this. I know I'm not the best speaker or teacher, so I'm open to any suggestions, and I hope you all enjoyed.